Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast IDP edition. I'm John Macri, and I'll be going over the top 10 IDP takeaways from Week 8. And we've got a number of changes at the linebacker position this week, not the least of which has to do with Ernest Jones changing teams midweek and stepping right into a significant role while donning his new Seattle Seahawks uni, and, of course, quite a few others as well. But if there are situations and or players that you want to hear more about, feel free to shout them in the comments. I'll do my best to highlight them maybe down the road or something like that. Or again, if it's an easy enough answer, I'll look to respond in the comments themselves. Otherwise, these will be our top 10-ish takeaways for this week. I think I have like maybe one or two more. And we'll have the IDP Fantasy Report out on Tuesday around noon Eastern time as well, which will have all the snap counts, data, notes, waiver wire targets for the entire week, which you can get access to with a PFF Plus subscription. And you'll get access to IDP rankings and all of our other tools and stuff like that over here at PFF. So let's kick it off here. We're going to start with the linebackers. We got a lot of linebacker stuff this week. And I wanted to highlight the Miami Dolphins linebackers really quick here, since this is a group that we've covered in recent weeks, with David Long really slowly being brought along back into a full-time role. And he finally got back there this week, to the point where, again, we can trust him in more lineups, right? We can move him up the rankings, etc. So David Long played 64 of 66 snaps, so 97%. It took a while to get there, but we finally got our two full-time linebackers back in Miami, with Jordan Brooks having never left that role. So I really just wanted to do a quick update on this one, because we've talked about it a few times, about how he's been kind of moving slowly back to that 100% snap share. No concerns about Anthony Walker here, so that was great. It was just Jordan Brooks, David Long, pretty much every single snap. But yeah, that was just a quick one to get out of the way before we get into the more interesting takeaways, like in Jacksonville, where Foye Ayodele returned off injured reserve this week. And we figured, coming into the week that there would still be some rotation, but it wasn't nearly as bad as it was like pre-injury, when Foye, he was kind of in that like 80% snap range. He ended up with 91% of snaps this week. So he rotated off only for a handful of snaps. And it was just early in the game, where he missed 3 snaps in the first quarter and 3 snaps in the second quarter, but played 100% of snaps in the second half, which was really promising to see, right? Because the rest of the linebackers in Jacksonville did continue their heavy rotation, mostly Ventrell Miller and Devin Lloyd, basically just rotating drives. Devin Lloyd played 56%, Ventrell Miller played 60%, and then Yasir Abdullah came on for like a few obvious passing situations. So the way things finished, again, 60% for Miller, Lloyd 56%, obviously Foye at 91%, and then Yasir Abdullah at 10%. So this is promising usage for Foye, I think, in his first game back from injury, especially in a close game where, it was a close game right up until the end, right? So hopefully this is a sign of things to come, and we can start treating Foye as a locked-in LB1 option again. But, we'll wait a week before kind of locking that status in, because this coaching staff really hasn't done enough to kind of earn our trust there just yet. But it was nice to see for Foye coming back from injured reserve and immediately playing a better snap share than what we had been seeing previous to the injury. Okay, continuing with the theme of returning linebackers from injury, one of the linebackers returning for the Carolina Panthers was Jewell, who stepped right back into his usual full-time role, which was kind of as expected, right? Now, the concern with Jewell's return would be how it would affect the rookie Trevon Wallace, who I know a lot of people, have been excited about this season as a productive rookie. And it wasn't as bad of a snap drop off as initially expected, which was good to see. Originally, I was kind of thinking that this would be about a 75% snap share for Trevon Wallace, coming off the field on third downs and obvious passing situations, but not too bad at all for Wallace, who ended up with 89% of snaps. I know, it wasn't like the production that we've been hoping for, at least from, the first, compared to the first couple of games where he had like 24 tackles in 2 games, I think it was. But he's definitely cooled off here recently, but the drop off in snaps wasn't too bad with Jewell back in the lineup. That might fluctuate a bit here in future weeks, but if you've been relying on Trevon Wallace in like non-shallow formats, you can probably continue to do so, and will hopefully get some better matchups kind of going forward. The next linebacker core that I wanted to look at, and who knows how long this one will last, because the Houston Texans should start getting guys back from injury next game, but I thought it was worth looking at anyways, just in case. So Neville Hewitt continued as the every down linebacker that he was last week, so nothing surprising there with Azeez Al-Shaair and Henry To'o out for this game once again. That was what we expected coming into the week. The other piece of it, though, was something that we also discussed in the preview show, which was Devin White mixing in and cutting into Jake Hanson's snaps, and that's what happened this week. These two linebackers were rotating drives throughout the game, where the snap shares actually ended up 50% each. So like I said, probably not going to be, something that carries any long-term value here once like Al-Shaair and To'o and even Christian Harris returns, since those 3 guys are all presumably higher in the pecking order, as is Neville Hewitt. So really, we're looking at just the deepest of IDP leagues for both Devin White and Jake Hanson to be options, and only if the injuries like to the starters continue to kind of linger here. But really not much interesting stuff going on for IDP purposes for Jake Hanson and Devin White, other than they're both now completely useless with those types of snap shares. So Neville Hewitt will be the guy if Al-Shaair and To'o or even Christian Harris continue to miss more time. Okay, speaking of mid linebackers cutting into the playing time of others, let's head to Denver, where Quan Alexander continues to be just enough of a thorn in the side of Justin Strnad, to the point where he's even hurting his outlook for like deeper leagues, right? Strnad, that is. Like, Quan Alexander played just 21% of snaps, but those are snaps that have typically been going to Strnad prior to these last 2 weeks. And now over these 2 weeks, Strnad has played just 60% and then 61% respectively, where he was at 77%, 73%, 76% in the 3 games before Quan's emergence, I guess, right? Now, the nice thing about Strnad is that he's been productive enough to not kill us when we're starting him, but we could get, kind of a lot of duds at this rate. So just being aware of matchups when starting him, aka listen to the IDP preview show right here every Thursday, and we'll cover that stuff in there. But, it's not looking great for Justin Strnad as Quan Alexander just continues to kind of work in there. As for Cody Barton, he was Cody Farton up an absolute stinker this week. Just 2 combined tackles despite playing 100% of snaps. Like a pretty big difference, obviously, from that monster performance he had in week 7, obviously. Hopefully this will be his worst game of the year. But again, still playing 100% of snaps. So just these duds tend to happen randomly throughout the season. So Cody Barton was a victim this week. Okay, next up is a linebacker situation that I didn't think would really give us anything new or interesting, but the New England Patriots proved me wrong. They switched things up at linebacker, where Jelani Tavai had previously been working as the LB1, though it wasn't a full-time role in recent weeks because the team was taking him off in obvious passing situations and replacing him with Christian Ellis, where this week they ended up replacing Tavai on a lot of his early downs with Christian Ellis as well, because he ended up with finishing the game by leading the linebackers in snap share at 84%, Christian Ellis, that is, and he led the entire team in tackles with 9, which included a sack. So obviously, with this New England linebacker core, there's no name brand linebackers in here. None of these guys were playing really so well that they deserve to be every down players. And obviously this new coaching staff under Gerard Mayo wasn't afraid to switch things up. So, kudos to them. And it's good info to kind of know going forward as well. If we're seeing more kind of mid performances on offense or defense, that they'll switch things up. So for now, Christian Ellis becomes the linebacker to roster in New England. He's not a locked in starter by any means, just because of that snap share not being, in a true full-time role. But he'll have some use in like non-shallow leagues now, right? So 84%, if that's what he's going to be, it's not perfect, obviously. And there'll be weeks where, he obviously doesn't get a sack. So those numbers will come down quite a bit, but he's not the worst option here. Considering, some of the other snap shares we just talked about, Justin Sternad around 61%, right? So somebody to keep an eye on for the waiver wires there is Christian Ellis. And I know, just staying in New England really quickly, I don't have a slide for it or anything, but I know Marte Mapu shit the bed this week. Just 3 tackles. He played 100% of snaps, but only 29% in the box. At least on our first run alignment data, which is, a far cry from what we've been getting from him in recent weeks. So not sure if that had to do with Kyle Duggar being out, but Duggar, like, he was playing a lot more in the box than that as well. So maybe it's related to the change at linebacker as well. So we'll have to kind of keep an eye on that one going forward. I know we talked about, this being a bad matchup for safeties as well in the preview show. So that definitely played a part in this outcome, but definitely would expect more from Marte Mapu. But if he's not getting those box snaps to the point where he was in previous weeks, he was at like 63 or 68% last week. 29% not really going to cut it to the point where he's worth starting every week. So we'll see what happens next week. All right, here we go. I was looking forward to how the Seattle Seahawks linebacker usage would shake out here in game 1 of the Ernest Jones era. We talked about it in the preview show, how Mike McDonald made it sound like they were going to play Ernest quite a bit, which at first I was skeptical about, but like I said on the show, I was feeling slightly more optimistic about Ernest Jones if we, kind of needed maybe an emergency option or we didn't have anybody else. It was seeming like it was going to be fine to play him. And well, they did not lie to us, because Josey was a 100% snap player in his first game with the team, joining them on a short week as well, and leading the team with 15 total tackles. And now the star of his new movie, Ernest Saves His IDP Managers, because what an effort to get out there for every snap in a brand new defense and look just like the LB1 that we drafted him to be. Mentioned it on the preview episode as well. This defense is a bit more tackle friendly for linebackers, as they typically play less man coverage than the Titans. So really nice stuff for Ernest Jones. Again, we saw this with him in Tennessee, right? Where it only took 1 game for him to get to a full-time snap share. It didn't take him any time at all for that to happen here in Seattle. So really, really good for the rest of the season outlook for Ernest Jones. And Tyrell Dodson didn't lose a snap either. So like to see that from him. Both of those guys playing 100% of snaps. Meanwhile, in Tennessee, Jerome Baker did not play at all. He was inactive for the Titans, and it was Kenneth Murray and Jack Gibbons who played full-time roles for Tennessee. So we'll have to temper expectations for Jerome Baker most likely next week, assuming he's active for his first game with the team. I also don't hate adding Jack Gibbons if you have the space, like just in case. So we'll monitor the Titans and see how things go. But obviously, Tennessee didn't feel as comfortable with Jerome Baker as Seattle did with Ernest Jones. So that's where we'll have to kind of see how they ease him into the lineup next week. Okay, how about another pleasant surprise, this time from the Los Angeles Chargers, where Diane Henley played 100% of snaps. Now, this isn't the first time this season that he's done that, but it is the first time that he's done it since all 3 of the Los Angeles Chargers linebackers have been active. So that's Diane Henley, Denzel Perriman, Junior Colson. In the 4 previous games, when all 3 of them were active, Henley was only averaging about 79% of the defensive snaps. So to see them give him back that full-time role that he was playing when Colson was out was definitely noteworthy, right? So 100% of snaps for Diane Henley. That allowed him for a team leading 10 total tackles. And this could be a really nice kind of rest of season value boost for Henley now as that lone 100% snap linebacker. He was already the clear leader of this group, but making sure he doesn't come off the field is a big help for his kind of IDP consistency. So happy to see that for Diane Henley for sure. All right, hey, since the NFL is in a giving mood here with the Henley increase in usage, Ernest immediately playing every snap with his new team, how about another young linebacker getting a snap boost this week? Jack Campbell of the Detroit Lions played 95% of snaps in week 8. Now, before we get too excited about this one, because we've all been kind of waiting for this, it is worth noting that this was a blowout and they were like facing a less than elite Tennessee Titans offense. So I'm not trying to overreact too much to this one. And it wasn't necessarily that, Jack Gibbons put up a whole bunch of snaps in garbage time or anything like that. That wasn't really the case. He kept it close with Anzalone all game. But the only thing is we've seen Detroit do this before with Jack Campbell and then kind of yank the snaps away the very next week. So instead, kind of what we'll do here is just bank this info, hope that it sticks next week for some consistency before trusting him in more starting lineups. The nice thing about Campbell is that he's much more efficient of a tackler compared to his partner there, Mr. Anzalone. So if you're feeling spicy and you want to trust Campbell in your starting lineup, like he still might lead this linebacker core in tackles anyways, even if that snap share does come down a bit. But either way, like 95% snap share for Jack Campbell, 95 for Anzalone, like I'd be happy with that each week, but it's just kind of a big TBD on if that's going to stick or not. I have my, I guess, hesitations, but cautiously optimistic, I guess is probably the best way to put it. Okay, as per usual, the NFL giveth and the NFL taketh away, because we got another key IDP injury, and this one, unfortunately, was Cleveland Browns linebacker Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who was carted off with a neck injury, which is always scary to see. Hopefully, JOK avoids major injury, but with him out of the game, he was replaced by Mohammed Diabate, who stepped into a full-time role to close out the game with JOK sidelined. It is important to note that, the next man up probably would have been Jordan Hicks, but he was inactive with his own injury this week. So have to figure JOK is going to miss at least one game. And that'll make it important to monitor kind of the injury reports, I think, heading into week 9, because if Hicks is back, there's a good chance that he'd kind of take over the LB1 role in the defense as kind of the more experienced player. Remember, Diabate is just a second-year UDFA linebacker who only had 100 defensive snaps in the NFL to his name coming into this week. So even the fact that they trusted him to call plays filling in for JOK this week is really impressive, but I'd imagine Jim Schwartz would feel a lot more comfortable having an established NFL vet in that role for an entire game or multiple games, however long JOK is out. But if Hicks is not available next week, then yeah, Diabate becomes an option as probably the only one worth trusting in this kind of one linebacker system. So something to keep an eye on there throughout the week here in Cleveland. Okay, that is all the linebackers. I did want to check in on Hassan Reddick of the New York Jets, playing his first game of the season this week after a very lengthy holdout. He finally agreed to a deal that would get him back on the field, and he was very clearly being eased back in as expected, right? He played just a 39% snap share, mostly on passing downs, didn't record anything IDP-wise, and just looking at like his unreviewed pass rush metrics. So this is just working off our broadcast footage before it's reviewed with like all 22 film and everything, but he currently has a 62.6 pass rush grade, which actually leads the Jets' edges right now. But again, still time for that to change as things get reviewed. And he had a 23.5% win rate, which was also the best mark on the team. He posted 3 total pressures for a 17.6% pressure rate, and that pressure rate led the team as well. So now we talked about how this was a nice pass rush matchup for the likes of like Will McDonald and Quinnen Williams, and of course it was the streak buster for McDonald and a slump buster for Quinnen Williams, who got a sack and a half. Hopefully he could keep that going. But as far as Reddick goes, initial pass rush metrics are encouraging, considering he hadn't played all season, regardless of matchup here, and we have to imagine that his snaps will rise as well over the next few weeks. So he played, what did I say how much he played? 39% of snaps. Yeah, I did say that. So we're going to imagine that those snaps are going to increase here going forward. So that'll let me kind of bump him up a little bit in the rankings, just bit by bit, right? We've seen the high end pass rush ability from Haason Reddick before. So, if he can salvage this season and prove that, he's worth the contract that he's looking for, there's at least potential in him that makes him worth an add here where he's available, right? Because he's likely somebody that was dropped in a lot of formats. If you have the space to stash him, like, this is a pass rusher we've seen deliver double-digit sacks like 3 seasons in a row. And, I'm not saying that he's going to get to that mark now, especially at the halfway point of the season, but the pass rush metrics early on were at least encouraging. The only thing is we'll have to wait for the snap share to kind of increase. So maybe he's more of a playoff run type IDP than anything if you have the space to stash him. But at least a decent sign here for Haason Reddick's IDP value in his first game of the season. All right, that's going to do it for me this week. A touch more than 10 takeaways. And I know it was very linebacker heavy this week. Every once in a while, that's going to happen when we get so many changes like this week. So apologies for those looking for the other positions. But as always, every position and every team will be covered in the IDP Fantasy Report, which will be out on Tuesday afternoon, which you could get access to with a PFF Plus subscription. And we'll be going game by game in the IDP Start Sit show later in the week as well. And we'll cover a lot of the stuff that we need to regarding those positions in there as well. So thank you all for tuning in. If you'd be so kind to like and subscribe to the channel, I'd greatly appreciate it. Or leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It helps us a ton. So I thank you all again for doing that. If you have already, you guys are the best. So I appreciate you. And a shout out to the PFF data collection team as well. Huge shout out to them for collecting all of this data. They're the real heroes. So yeah, if you know any of them, definitely thank them for their hard work. The show isn't possible without all of that data that they're collecting all day long. So that's it for me. Feel free to ask questions in the comment section. And until next time,